Okay, I'm gonna let my opening prayer be from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. So this comes from chapter 3, and maybe it will become clear as you hear these words. I'm sure not for the first time. For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory he may grant you to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now to him, who by the power at work within us is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, to him be glory in the Church and in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever. And Mother Mary, we commend ourselves, our families this evening, our parish to you. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I always love as Catholics that the late arrivals, the only chairs left are going to be in the front. But these are not late arrivals, some of them, other than Father Sam just got off a plane about an hour ago from Rome, so he's here jet-lagged. Welcome home. Welcome home. And then some of these wonderful parents are just coming from First Reconciliation Night for their children in the church, so kind of a lot going on, which is beautiful. So some years ago, I was on a train in Italy. I feel like we were coming from Assisi going to Rome, and I was with 3 friends, and we were just filled with joy. And we were just talking, kind of unaware of people even around us. But at a certain point, I could see this man, probably in his mid-late 30s, in a suit, clearly commuting one way or another from work, just listening. And I even didn't know, how much he had heard or what he saw. But at one point he said, I don't want to interrupt, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but you told these guys that there's this place in the world where you could pray and you could pray there forever because you lose track of time. And he goes, what does that mean? And I was like, okay, how many stops till he gets off this train? How much time do I have? What do I say? What do I say? But I guess I share that because you never know who's observing and what they're looking for. Ultimately, we're all searching for hope and happiness and fulfillment and what they glimpse. And then when you get a chance, I fumbled the ball probably. I don't remember myself doing a great job at whatever opportunity I had. But I remember the moment being like, oh yeah. So one of the things we want to reflect on is just like how faith can give this radiance, like of a fullness of life, like true peace. Like true peace is this perspective. I don't carry things heavily. I let small things be small. Politics, the economy aren't my God. Like I can pay attention and be invested, but it's just not where I give my energies. Like, true faith is like this art of living well and joyfully. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. So next week we're going to talk about how we go out, right? So tonight I want to just give you a working definition of faith. There should be enough of these on your table. And it's not necessarily important. I may not read all the quotes on there, but just so you have them, whether you want to hear something and you're like, oh, that kind of captures me. But a working definition of faith: an encounter with an exceptional presence. I want to stop there for a second. Why do I say encounter? Because faith doesn't originate in our head, our mind. It is a fact of history. It is a factor in history. Like, it's a reality that we can bump into. What does it say in the first chapter of John? The Word became flesh and he dwelt among us. It says he pitched his tent among us, which means you could run into his tent. You bumped into him. So let's never forget that. Faith is never just something I conjure in my mind, or I have to witness it. I have to have an encounter with Jesus, with others who know him, who show him to me. And then because of that encounter, I'm awakened to wonder. Wonder. I'm curious. I'm like, I'm just thinking on a different level. I'm not just plowing through my day, trying to get through. I'm not a beast of burden. I wonder. And then this gives way to following the one I've encountered. So encounter, it gives rise to wonder, and then makes me want to follow. And I just jotted down 3 kind of ways. What does it mean to follow Jesus? I think it means looking at him. I'm going to come back to this a lot. Looking at him with an attitude of attention and affective attachment. These pictures aren't really that important. It's just that without them, I find that this, it's a little sterile in here. And sometimes it's nice to rest your eyes, but you can kind of see it. It's a little dark. But this is Martha and Mary. Remember what Jesus said about Mary? Just listening to him, just gazing on him gazing. The one thing necessary. And it won't be taken from her. Remember Zacchaeus? He had this beautiful desire to see Jesus, so he climbed a tree. We're told that people in the Gospels just hung on his word. What would it be like to just sit in the silence, look at Jesus, and just hang on his word? That's to follow him. It means attempting to learn through our own experience the truth that he reveals. No one can do this part of faith for you. It's called verification. I have to verify what Jesus says in my own experience, which means I have to seek and I have to learn, And then striving to imitate how he does things. Like, he's so wise. Remember they all said, where did he get all this? His dad's a carpenter. How can he talk like this? Remember, that's always the question they ask. And then he's so courteous. Like the woman at the well, she's their 7th husband. They're not actually married, but she's living with him. And she's like, you got to come and meet this man who told me everything I ever did. And my shame's gone. And so it makes you wonder, what if I just started to try to live the Beatitudes? What if I just said, I would have just started practicing. Monday, I'm going to work on purity of heart. Tuesday, merciful. I don't know, but in your own creative way. But what if I just started to live that and to see if these words are really true? How many times did Jesus say, come and see? And we're told they spent time with him. So what does it mean to follow Jesus? I think first it just means we have to spend time with him. We can do that in the comfort of our own home, with other people, in our chapel, in nature. And then follow me. This was on my ordination invitation. You get a sense that Jesus was always telling people, follow me. And do you appreciate how radical that is? He knew who he was. I wouldn't tell people to follow me, Dreadfully, no. I'm going to try to point the way to him, And St. Thomas Aquinas had this thing. He says, Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And he says there's actually a sequence that's revealed in that. Like if you start following me, you've heard me say, what is faith? It's this, and I have to get forward momentum. And sometimes we think forward momentum takes a lot. It doesn't. It doesn't. It takes one little discipline in my life. I'm going to do this. And then you see what happens. And then I take another step. And the next thing you know, I have forward momentum. I'm on the way. And being on the way, I discover the truth. It's no longer an abstraction. Yeah, you can teach me in catechism, I learned it in 10th grade, whatever. It doesn't matter, it comes alive. Because I have momentum. I'm experiencing it in my own life. And then it becomes the fullness of life. Like for each of us concretely here and now. And it deepens and unfolds through all of life. Not always in a linear way. And I'm going to come back to that. Because you and I would love for the journey to be completely linear. Because we all have a little tendency with perfectionism, right? So that's where we've got to come back to that. Okay, so just this little quote from, maybe as a way to summarize what this first part is. In our very experience, there is something that comes from beyond it. Unforeseeable, not immediately visible, mysterious, but within our experience. The instrument by which we grasp this presence is faith. And by a living faith, we begin to feel the breath or the tremor or the consequences of a presence that cannot be explained exhaustively by reason. Christ here and now. This is why I say it's an encounter that awakens wonder. You know? It awakens wonder. There's this great quote, I often read it on the silent retreat. It says, St. Gregory Nyssa in like the 4th century. He says, knowledge tends to create idols. I-D-O-L-S. It's in my grasp. He says, only wonder truly understands. Because I realize I'm not going to pull God down to my measure. I'm going to step into the mystery. We were TV starved in my family, you know this, but one of the shows I loved to watch was Jacques Cousteau. Remember Jacques Cousteau? That little French, he was French, wasn't he? And he'd get all suited up in the boat, and then he'd go boom. And you're like, wow, there's a whole mysterious world below the water, you know? And you get to explore it with him through the TV. In some ways, that's faith. Like, it's an exploration because we're living in wonder. Like when we're alive, we're childlike again. I was just telling these parents here, like, when did we get to lose playfulness in life? And why did we lose it? I don't know. Maybe it's because we're holding on to stuff. Against others, against ourselves. What if we just let that down? We might be a little more carefree, a little bit more filled with wonder. So when I say this, I'm not primarily speaking here of cryptic signs in the clouds, or even miracles, although we do believe in miracles. But that's not primarily what I'm referring to here in faith. I'm referring to taking your heart's needs and desires seriously. Taking your experience seriously. So that you say, I am made for happiness, and yet every time I get there, I'm never fully happy. What does that tell me? Augustine would say, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So let's not fill it up. Let's keep being on the way to Him, who's going to reveal to us the truth. And when we taste that, that's life. His love is better than life as I conceive of it. Then I live, then I'm truly alive. He says how burdensome life is if you had to follow wisdom. Stay with this quote. It's a little confusing, but it's very insightful. How burdensome life is if you had to follow wisdom. Extremely burdensome. It's the opposite of the unbearable lightness of being. The life of the sage is unsustainable, so much that it's impossible to find a sage who carries out what he says and thinks. The truth we are made to discover from faith is Jesus. He alone sustains the entire weight of our future until it arrives at destiny. So sometimes, secretly, don't we want a manual? Don't we want a manual, 5-year plan? And sometimes people come to me and I feel like they just want me to fix it. But it's not the best thing that I can give them. First of all, most of the times I can't. It's not just an answer that I can resolve. Or are we made for relationship, adventure, learning? It says in Hebrews, Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Isn't that something? So if we follow Him, and if He said, follow me, He means that today. You and I get to follow Him every day. Every day we get to do that. So I have the privilege of accompanying others in spiritual direction, It's very holy ground. I mean, you want to take off your shoes because they're inviting you into places that no one else goes. Their own heart, and it's beautiful. Now, first point is, like, there I am serving them, and I need spiritual direction. I go once a month, right? No one directs themselves fully. So that means that they can't be coming to see me to untangle things or to give them the answer or to solve the problem for them. And now that's tempting for all of us, right? But what's more important is to listen so their deepest heart can be acknowledged, and then to encourage them to relate that to Jesus, here and now. Relate that to him. And then receive from him. Listen to him. I don't know what he's going to tell you. He surprises me. I mean, I know it's going to be good. But that's the key. That's faith. It's this kind of spark of a relationship. Okay. So here we have Peter, and you'll see why he's there. It is that man Jesus that John and Andrew heard speak and looked in the face. It is Jesus who carried the entire weight of their future right up to their destiny. The new word we must use for faith is trust. That man created a trust in them that Peter voiced in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. This is the best, isn't it? What an act of faith. Master, even we don't understand what you're saying. But if we go away from you, where shall we go? You alone have the words that explain life. So real practically, how is our faith strengthened? Through trust. The word trust comes from this Latin word fidare, which means and implies you have to entrust yourself to someone. Trust is entrusting yourself to someone. This morning after daily mass, I was processing out, and Carrie White, I don't know if Carrie's here tonight, but her little, probably not, she's probably putting her little ones to bed, but Charlie was there, she's at daily mass, and Charlie's just taken his first steps. Looks like he's going to be a rugby player, you know? And you remember these first steps of children? Everyone's an adventure. Or it's just like they're so unsteady. It's delightful. Everyone loves watching them. Mom's right there as kind of a guardrail. It's exhilarating, you know? I want to propose, like, there's the dynamic of getting forward momentum in faith can actually be like this. I know we want to go from 0 to 60. No one in this room is, what is his name, Usain Bolt? No, just want to break it to you. You're not going from 0 to 60. Just take steps. Just forward momentum. We keep walking. He creates this trust in us. So this is a beautiful photo from Pope Francis at World Youth Day. I had my classmates for dinner. Kudos to Megan Fayant who cooked for us. It was amazing. And Father James Adams, a classmate, was there. So we were just hearing one story after another from Portugal, where it was. Great stories. But Pope Francis says the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus. Those who accept this offer of salvation are set free from what? From sin, sorrow, heaviness, inner emptiness, and loneliness. With Christ, joy is constantly born anew. So you say to yourself, yeah, but I've always been following Jesus and I'm not joyful. Yeah, it just means you need to encounter him more deeply, here and now. Stay with him. Come back to him. So here's you saw the title, Living the Gift of Faith Attractively. One of the saints in the communion of saints, and I hope you get to a place, if you're not there already, where you say, I have friends in the communion of saints. I would not be the man I am or the priest I am without St. Francis de Sales, a man who lived, 450 years ago. I want to go visit his relics someday. I hope to, maybe in a few years. But he wrote this book, Introduction to the Devout Life. And it was the first time in my early 20s where I was like, whoa, okay, I got to make this my own. And you're saying this is what faith is? Faith is supposed to be attractive? So listen to how he says this. Not only should you be devout and love the devout life, but you should be making that life beautiful to behold. You ever thought of it that way? Now it will be beautiful to the extent to which it is useful and agreeable to others. The sick will love your piety if it causes them to be charitably consoled. Your family will love it if it makes you more solicitous of their good, milder in the face of life's vicissitudes, and withal more amiable. You ready for this? Nobody elbowing their spouse right now, okay? Your spouse will love it to the extent to which your devotion makes you warmer and more affectionate. If your parents and friends see in you a greater frankness, helpfulness, and readiness to bend their wills in those things that are not contrary to the will of God, they too will find your life of devotion attractive. And this, as much as possible, should be your aim. Can I translate all this in my Grandma Marie's lexicon? She would say, Lord, save us from sour-faced saints. And I'd call her, and she'd be at her cozy condo with these relics all around. And I'm saying relics like holy relics, but like a golf ball that was a hole-in-one that Father McMahon had hit, and she's got it in a cup somewhere, you know. And I said, Grandma, what's for dinner? You know, brandy and popcorn. And I'm telling you, my grandma was a force of nature. She brought zest, she brought life. Some of you knew her. But you know what she also did? She was living in this condo. Everyone came and gone. Like, there was this Mary Nesset who was special needs. And Mary Nesset would the door was open. She'd just come in. And sometimes she was verbal, but kind of sometimes in her own world. My grandma would have fun with her, but she just let Mary be. And Mary felt comfortable there. She felt comfortable in my grandma's presence, the radiance of the joy of something different, you know? We're going to talk about this later as we go along, but just the importance of our lives being so open to other people because we've encountered Him that we want to encounter others, you know? We want to share without forcing anything. Like, we don't want to be manipulative. We don't want pressure. We just want to share a fullness in our own attractive way, you know? I see that here so much at St. Ambrose. I really do. I see that in this, I call it our indoor piazza, you know, after Mass, and these beautiful encounters and people wanting to share this with others. Okay, I'm not going to say this is the bad news, but we've got to talk about this. Because where does the forward momentum of faith seem to come off the rails? Like, I was doing so good. I had a good streak. Speaking of streaks, by the way, when I was looking up in the church to read them something from Les Mis, a text from my oldest brother came in, and the Minnesota Twins won a playoff game. And he said the last time that happened was 2004. Isn't that amazing? Okay, back to this. This is a quote I came across in the Magnificat. Her feast day would have been Sunday, St. Therese. She's one of my favorite too. I think I put a picture of her up here. This just struck me. She says, oh Jesus, how happy I would be if I had been faithful. But alas, I put in this, but alas, ugh. Often in the evening I am sad because I feel I could have corresponded better with your graces. If I were more united to you, more charitable with my sisters, humble and more mortified, I would feel less sorrow when I talk to you in prayer. Does anyone know this? Am I speaking English here? You ever have this moment? I want to be in God's presence, but I just feel my own ugh. And then she says, and yet, oh my God, very far from becoming discouraged at the sight of my miseries, I come to you with confidence, recalling your words that those who are well do not need a doctor, but the sick do. I beg you then to cure me and pardon me, and I place in your divine heart the struggles of this exile. So whenever, this can be a daily thing, we just have to keep going against it because of who God is and how we've tasted His love. When we feel deflated, defeated, this kind of heaviness, and I'm not talking about the melancholic temperament. I won't ask you as a show of hands, but my guess would be 1/4 of you in this hall, more or less, by nature are melancholics. Which doesn't mean this necessarily. Although, and he wouldn't mind, and I'm being recorded, so I'll send it to him for his own fun. Because my previous associate was a melancholic by temperament, self-proclaimed actually. But I came home one day, it was Friday late afternoon, and Friday was his day off. And he was sitting in the living room, and he looked so sad, you know. And I thought maybe he's just tired from a full week, and so I said, how was your day? He said, you'll never believe what happened. I was sitting down reading, and a bird flew into the window and died. And I said, well, have you been thinking about that ever since? And he said, yes. And we laughed about it. We had a great time, right? So you got to know yourself a little bit too. But what I'm talking about here, you can be choleric, you can be sanguine, you can be phlegmatic, but we all know this inner discouragement of like, you know, even the people when you taste retreat and you're like, I am alive. And then you're like, oh shoot, I got to get back to real life. No. You think God just wants to give you that taste just so you can feel worse about yourself? Like, that can't be the goal. So we have to go against this. Just keep pressing into His mercy. And this is what I love about St. Therese. Like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I do feel that sorrow and sadness, but I'm not going to be discouraged. Pope Francis, how good it feels. I just read this quote to the parents, you know. How good it feels to come back to Him whenever we are lost. Let me say this once more. God never tires of forgiving us. We are the ones who tire of seeking His mercy. Time and again He bears us on His shoulders. No one can strip us of the dignity bestowed on us by this boundless and unfailing love. With a tenderness which never disappoints, but is always capable of restoring our joy, He makes it possible to lift up our heads and to start anew. Let us not flee from the resurrection of Jesus. Let us never give up, come what will. May nothing inspire us more than His life, which impels us onward. Isn't that so hopeful? Because it's true. It's just true. Like, what's the one sin God can't forgive? The one you don't tell Him. The one you hold on to. The one you let believe disqualifies you. Every other one, which is everyone, huh? Every single one. There's just nothing. And the most beautiful thing about, now I'm talking here about a daily reality, but Sacrament of Reconciliation is pretty sweet too. And it's beautiful to see how many parishioners in the last 3 years are in a monthly pattern now. And after they get in the monthly pattern, they just start to like, oh, it's not meant to be an excruciating, intimidating experience every time I go. That's not actually what God desires. So when I go more frequently, I actually just taste God's logic. Like, I just need forgiveness. That's all. I just need forgiveness. And I'm not going to be ashamed to ask for it. And I'm just going to receive it again. And even if it feels like I'm saying some of the same things, I'm just going to trust Him. Come to me, all you are burdened. And there's no greater burden than our sin, and I will give you rest. Okay, let's take the next step. What follows from trusting God as a path we walk each day, especially trusting Him with our sins, is abandonment and total confidence. Let me just say a word about both of those. The greatest sign of abandonment is a child in its mother's arms. My favorite, there we go. Aaron, thank you for the prop right there, like a child in its mother's arms. Good. It's my favorite psalm to live in, especially when people want to speculate about the future or my future. Some people are like, Father, I'm so glad, but I mean, you're not going anywhere. You're going to live in that rectory we're building, right? And then I start to feel anxious, like, I don't know. And I just go back to Psalm 131. Like a child at rest in its mother's arms, even so my soul. Like, okay, when I'm there, I'm secure and I can be bold. It's as if one's had all one's sources of pride dried up. Why? Because my identity, where I draw life, my center of gravity, where I lean into, isn't my own strength anymore. And so I'm even more confident. St. Therese would say she got to a place in her life where she was no longer scandalized by her own weakness. She'd just be like, oh yeah, I must have drifted from the Lord. I better go back. Instead of making a project of it, right? Like, I did it again. Do you remember that Muppets character who would bang he's the piano player? What was his name?
Grover.
Grover. Okay. He'd bang his head against the keys and he'll say, I'll never get it. Ever, ever, ever. That's not our call here, huh? I can do all things. I am capable of all things together with Him in whom lies my strength. Do you believe that? It's okay if you don't. Hope is the certainty of the presence of Jesus in every present moment. You don't have to have the strength ahead of time. Remember what Jesus said about building barns? You know how we get super nervous to live that kind of dependence? I kind of got to this place in priesthood where it was very clear to me that the Lord wasn't going to let me find a way to live priesthood without needing Him every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I got this now. So it's kind of fun to look back. I mean, you do learn a little bit because I'm like, Father Sam's in his second year of priesthood, but his first full, and you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, funeral homilies and all those things at the beginning take a little more. But even so, the Lord was never going to, He's not going to let me find, He's not going to let you find a way to live your vocation without needing Him. And there's no shame in that. That's a beautiful thing. I'm the way, walk with me. I'm the truth. I'll bring light and life. And then this kind of trust, especially with our sin, means total confidence in front of all, and I mean all, of one's own weakness. If I recognize that my strength is in Him, none of my weaknesses can stop me. So sometimes when I'm leading retreats, depends on the retreat and what the Lord's doing, but I will ask this question. Are you tired yet of your own excuses? Like, I really want to grow in faith, I want to become holy, I want to forward momentum, but, and I just say it in a light way. Are you tired yet of those excuses? Why not you? You know the great French poet Léon Bloy, he said, the only great sadness in life is not to become a saint. It means if the Twins lose to the Blue Jays in 3 games, it's not a sadness, ultimately, right? It's this, I don't live up to my potential, and God's called me. And what is a saint? It's a sinner who surrenders to love. So no one's disqualified. Every saint had a past, every sinner has a future. So this final quote, it isn't necessary then to cultivate plans of perfection, but to look Christ in the face. This is the only true revolution in the world. Faith is knowledge and charity, looking at Christ in the face as morality even. It is looking Him in the face that one feels this purifying, cleansing strength. So faith is just beginning again, always from the gaze of Jesus. I put John 21 down. This might be a place you just pray with this week. Do you remember what that is? It's Jesus encountering Peter for the first time after He denied Him 3 times. It's pretty extraordinary. You can imagine Peter was a little nervous, huh? He's dripping wet. Jesus has just made breakfast for them. That's pretty hospitable. And then their gaze finally meets. And Jesus does not say, Peter, you screwed up. Peter, you left me, you hurt me. He just says, Peter, do you love me? Just ask him, do you love me? And so sometimes we make our faith a little more complicated, or we put ourselves in the doghouse of our own making. We beat ourselves up, and the Lord just doesn't want that. He just wants us to keep walking. Which is why this culture of mercy here happening at St. Ambrose is so beautiful. I don't have to pretend that I've arrived. I don't have to pretend that I'm stronger or I have to look a certain way. I just get to be my authentic self and keep following and walking with Him. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this last little part there, because I hope I shouldn't tell you this because then none of you will come the fourth time, but I hope as part of our discussion for the fourth evening to have you practice, which means thinking about, in 3 or 4 minutes, how to give your own personal witness. Do you know one of the beautiful things, if you can remember that pandemic, and I was invited, we had a little iPhone before, empty church, daily Mass, and I'd invite all these parishioners, I'd say, hey, do you want to come to Mass? Because no one could come. You get to receive the Eucharist. Oh, but would you give a witness after Mass? Do you know not a single person said no? Not a single one. We had almost 2 months in a row. But do you know that every one of them are like, why are you asking me? Like, why do you think I'm asking you? Because you got a beautiful faith. And every one of them was so moving. And so as Catholics, we do have to get a little beyond like, shucks, I don't know, I'm just a card-carrying, pew-filling, just, no, you all got, those 2 months in a row were beautiful. I would get emails from people who watched those, and it was like, so one way to think about it is to go through the kerygma. That's a big word, but it's probably a word it's worth knowing. The kerygma is the essence of the joyful announcement that Jesus Christ is a living person to be encountered. And these are kind of the 5 steps of the basic kerygma: creation, fall, redemption, salvation, recreation. And it's just kind of like ponder your own story of like, okay. So that's a little, I'm not going to say homework because that feels heavy all of a sudden, doesn't it? But just to be thinking about that so that we can kind of share that with each other. Next time, we're going to talk about the church that goes out, a parish of missionary disciples, inviting, sharing. The good is diffusive. Like, I can't keep it to myself. Remember Jesus, you don't light something and put it under a bushel basket. Like, faith is strengthened when it's lived, given away, and shared. And we really want to focus on that and the mechanics. Time after that, we'll talk about the art of accompaniment. So, we've got about a half hour. We're going to have a few announcements, and Justin's going to share a little bit before we close at 8:15. At your tables, here's what I want you to do. I just want you to listen to each other. First of all, introduce yourselves and just share a little bit about yourselves. This is the beauty. Even though some of you may know where you're configured, or if you're at a table with a few and you want to fill out another table, that'd be beautiful too. That's easy enough, just to fill out the groups a little bit. Share who you are. And then share the one part of the reflection tonight that just stirred you, caused you desire or curiosity, just the one thing that, like, I think that's the pearl for me. And then share someone in your life who's lived the faith attractively. And just talk about that. How did they live? What made it attractive? What struck you? Maybe it's from the past, maybe it's from the present. So introduce yourself, the one part that struck you, and then someone in your life who lived it attractively. And maybe in about 20-25 minutes, we'll call Salt Life together. Amen? Okay, so let's do that.